Hi, welcome back to Cheyenne, Wyoming Urban Gardener, and this is Debbie, and I just wanted to go over a little bit of the garden today. It's only been a couple of days since my last video, but there is so much that changes in a garden in just a couple of days that it can entirely look different than what you did just 2 days ago. I had gotten out here in the last video. I mentioned that I have been upplanting or uppotting tomato suckers that I started from roots, and I had finished and done the very last one, so we've got 3 left that I have gotten into pots and have rooted, and I just wanted to show you what they look like after they've gotten established in their new containers, and they've already perked up. Even this one is considering blooming already, and just perked up, looking very pretty. The only one that is left that doesn't look quite as good is this one over here. I'm keeping a little bit more in the shade because it was only potted 2 days ago, so it's still a little bit wilty. It will be for a couple more days, and then it'll perk up like these have. These have been in the soil now for 4 days, and they look fantastic, and I'm ready to go ahead and call their new owner and say, hey, your tomatoes are ready, come on and pick them up. I'll just go ahead and put a little bamboo stake in them, and they will be good to go to continue growing in those containers. That'll be plenty of soil for them to finish out the season with. And our cabbages and broccoli and things like that are still looking wonderful. I am going to go ahead and let the person know that was going to pick them up to go ahead and come and pick them up, because they are ready to go and be planted. And we've got a few more celosia that I had found in a pot, and she's going to be picking up some borage as well, so the last 2 borage, so she'll probably go ahead and pick up the celosia. And all the other plants, they are just looking amazing. Our burpee picular cucumbers are starting to get a lot bigger now, getting their mature leaves on, and just looking fantastic. All of the container gardens still looking amazing. We have gotten more yellow pear tomatoes that are ripened. You can see those down there. And our giant tomatillos that we transplanted, that were real small plants, are now getting pretty big, and they'll just continue to grow. Hopefully they'll produce something before the end of the season. And this is Sandy from Suburban Homesteader, Wyoming/Arizona's huge tomato. She didn't tell me what kind it is. She just says huge tomato that she grew in Arizona, and she sent some seeds to several of us, and I did go ahead and get it started. I'm not sure that it'll have enough time to produce because it's probably acclimated to Arizona weather, which is a lot longer than ours is, but you never know. Maybe we will, and maybe I'll take it all on inside the house to finish up if it starts to get cold or anything. Our yellow dahlia that I had picked up as a distress plant, got it for $1, has put on some blooms. You can see those here, so it is getting ready to bloom on both sides, and I'm actually thinking about going ahead and trying to separate it and make 2 separate dahlias, because you can do that with the root. So we'll find out. I'll do a little bit more research on it before I completely decide on that and end up killing it or something. All of our other plants are doing great. I did get out here and with some fertilizer spikes. I just had 2 packs of 30 Job's organic fertilizer spikes, so I did go ahead and get out here and just stick some spikes into each one of the containers. I did on the larger ones 3 spikes, and some of the medium-sized ones 2 spikes, and then the smaller ones just 1 spike. Everything is looking so amazing. The basil that I have harvested off of still is just perked back up and looks exactly like what it was before I harvested anything, especially the cinnamon basil and the sweet basil that's in here. And again, this is some of the basil from the Dollar Tree that you get on these little, I think they're called like basil rockets or something. It's just basically some basil seed in what looks like a little bit of some coconut coir that's dyed green. And you roll it out, and you don't have to roll it out. You can keep it in the little rocket, but I didn't think that some of the seeds would come up, so I just went ahead and unrolled it, put it in here, and we had several of those basil that went ahead and came up and then have grown to maturity, as well as I transplanted some cinnamon basil in here, and also some lemon basil in here, and it's all doing wonderfully. We've harvested off of all of it, and I'm actually thinking I'm going to go ahead and let the cinnamon basil go to seed because I need seeds off of that one. I don't have a whole lot of seeds on the cinnamon basil. And we've got a dark opal basil that I transplanted into a section of the garden, but for some reason for me the dark opal basil is a little bit more difficult to grow than the other basil, so we only ended up with one plant of that. I've planted it a few times and one of them is the only one that survived. I've got some basil in a container over here that was the 50 different varieties of basil for my grandson, but it was in that crappy soil that we got, the Schultz soil, and it's not doing so good. So one of them was really pretty, a mottled basil, and I'm thinking about transplanting it, but the success rate on transplanting basil has never been very good for me, so I'm a little bit unsure if I want to try that and then just end up killing it off. All of our watermelons are continuing to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Cucumbers are starting to set cucumbers. We haven't gotten cucumbers as yet. Again, the season has been slow, and I've noticed that the Space Master cucumbers seem to take a lot longer than some of the others, so I will not be planting that one again. I did get some new cucumber seed that I'm going to be trying next season called Suyo cucumbers that are a very long variety of cucumber. I'll be trying those next season. They're a little bit longer season, but if I get them started at the very beginning, I think we'll be okay on that. The spring burpless cucumber, which is this one, is starting to produce. I haven't gotten anything to size that I can harvest as yet, but it does have quite a few cucumbers on it that are coming on. And this one turned out to be a cucumber. Remember, we were talking about in some of the last videos that I wasn't sure what it was, a cantaloupe or a cucumber. Ended up that it is a cucumber. I think it's one of the straight eights, and I just forgot to mark it, or the mark maybe came out or something, or the little, basically the thing to tell me whether or not what it is missing. So anyway, tag. More yellow pear tomatoes are getting ripe over here on this yellow pear tomato vine. And just again, wonderful amounts of watermelons through here. We've got watermelons pretty much hanging 3 and 4 on each plant at this point. Some of them are a little bit more behind than others, but hopefully we'll have some watermelons this season. And the butter dish squash that struggled at the very beginning is definitely beginning to fill out the pot. I mentioned that in the last video, and it has basically doubled in size even since that video 2 days ago. Over here in the herb garden, we had planted some pak choi, and unfortunately the pak choi looks like it got eaten by something, so I'm not sure whether it got eaten by bugs or it was eaten by rabbits, because it is more susceptible to rabbits out here in this section, or squirrels. So it got eaten, so I just went ahead and replaced it with some more lettuce seeds, more of the 4-season lettuce, and some radishes, and then we've got some blend of lettuces in this section. All of our beans came up. I remember I planted some contender beans in here, and I think we planted about 25 seeds, and all 25 have came up or are coming up. So all of those will be up and producing in about 40 days. So we're looking at the very beginning of September, and they will be up and producing. Our cucumbers over here, since we have gotten the salvia out of the way, have definitely started putting on more size. They're blooming now and starting to get their runners on these two, because these are the two that were most shaded, and they have really started picking up and growing. And that one as well, there's 3 in here. Some of them have a couple of cucumbers each. Usually I would thin those, but I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. And then we've got a cucumber over here that's on the trellis, and that one is doing really well. We've seen a couple of cucumbers pop up on it. These are the Space Master cucumbers as well, so they're doing a little bit better out here in the ground than they are in the containers. But as far as the rest of the cucumbers that I have, they like the containers more. They do not like it in ground. So it's a mixed bag sometimes on what you're going to get. Our red Marvel lettuce over here is getting its color. 2 days ago when I showed you this, it was barely getting color, and now it has just in 2 days gotten so much bigger. It looks like the Four Seasons right now, but it will turn entirely red very soon, and it's called Red Marvel. And I'm just going to stand back a little bit as we look at the second main plot of the garden that has the corn in it, of just how much in 2 days things have changed over here. It may not look like it initially, but it has. The Tahitian squash, which you see right here at the base of the corn that runs all along in this section, it actually starts up here, and it has ran now all the way to the back, and it will continue to run. The vines on these get about 75 to 100 feet long. They start producing long before that, usually at about 20 feet. I've noticed the vines will start putting on their vegetable, their squash. And again, they're kind of like a butternut squash that is a lot bigger. They get between 30 pounds, they get to 30 pounds or more. Each squash that's on them, they look very much like a butternut squash, except a much longer neck. And they taste so much like a butternut squash, but to me, they're even better because they are so much better for soups and stuff. And I'm not really too fond of a super, super sweet squash. So these are a little bit more mild and a little bit nuttier flavor, but very similar to a butternut squash, and I just like them better for soups. You can actually see one of the vines on one of the Tahitian squash. There's basically 4 in here. You can see one of the vines all the way to the back. So definitely growing like crazy. Our beans are just out of control now. I don't even know where the rows are anymore. All I can guess by the rows is where the rows of corn are, because they're right up against the corn, and they are blooming, running like crazy. They've basically are climbing up over this stump and just climbing up the zinnias and climbing up all the corn. And so we should have a good amount of beans in here pretty soon. They're a little bit more shaded in here than they are in the main garden, the first main garden. So it does take a little bit longer for them to start producing, but they're only like maybe a week, 2 weeks behind the others. So they'll be basically producing just about any time. And then of course we got the Royal Burgundy beans back there, the bush beans, which have basically turned into a short vining bean, but much, much bigger leaves than the other ones. And I've got massive leaves right now on all of my beans in here. They're the best that I've ever seen. So, and I have not really fertilized this section of the garden that much. The only thing I've used is a water-soluble fertilizer, basically a 20-20-20, and I've done it 2 times. I haven't done it a 3rd time so far because we have corn already producing, and I don't like to put fertilizer on it once we already have corn producing in here, because the pollen on the tassels needs to drop down on the silks of the corn. And I don't really like getting the corn very wet right now. In fact, when I water, I usually just stick the hose between the rows and just really water the heck out of them from basically the root. So we got a lot of corn in here. All of it's tasseled now except for the very, very back, which is just about ready to tassel any day. And they're all looking fantastic. We've got 2 and 3 ears on each stalk, which has never happened for me with the early Sunglow hybrid. And they look like nice full ears. So I really look forward to this. Got another probably 4 to 5 weeks before we actually start checking the ears to get the corn, but it is just looking fantastic. And our Kellogg's breakfast tomatoes are now blooming and starting to produce. This basil over here does need to be replanted. It has basically started wanting to go to seed, and I don't need any more basil seed right now of this variety, so I may just go ahead and pull it out and start some whole new fresh basil and just dry this off. And our lemon cucumber, you can see now the runner on it. Just 2 days ago it was not quite running that much, but it has started to climb the trellis like crazy. And our Guido-Cassaman squash are not far behind it. It was actually planted about a week before the Guido-Cassaman squash was, and they are getting runners and they have blooms on them, so hopefully we'll get some squash off of those guys. And our other Kellogg's breakfast tomato is blooming. Our little short one is still short, so I don't think it's going to end up doing anything, and it looks like that it is suffering in the heat. You got some leaves on there that are browning. I've tried trimming them off, but it just keeps doing that. So I think either it's at the end of its not wanting to do anything or something. So I just need to pull it out of here. So it leaves room for the other one. Still lots of greenery on our Kennebec potatoes. Not even the sign of them wanting to die back at all. So I may end up having to go ahead and dig those without the vines dying off. And all of the rest of the garden is just looking amazing. I won't make this video too super long because we just had a tour of the garden basically a couple days ago. But everything is just looking amazing. It just is surprising how much growth happens in just 2 days. And all of this week, we're going to be having temperatures in the upper 80s and 90s. So we will have a lot more growth on things, but it's difficult when we have high temperatures like that to keep it as moist in here as it needs to be as far as the ground. And we're having to, of course, water by hose instead of actually having drip irrigation or anything like that, because I'm just not sure the drip irrigation will work out very well for us here. But we've got beans like crazy that are coming on. I did notice that I tried a couple of my peas today, and they're getting kind of fibrous now, so we're probably just going to be shelling peas from this point forward. But they are wonderful peas when you shell them. And we've got the Cascadia in here, as well as Alaskan snow peas and the super snappy. So 2 of those are shelling peas. 1 really isn't, but you can shell it if you want to and eat it. And that's what we've been doing. So I'm just going to go ahead and let these finish on up and shell the peas and probably save some of the peas for seed. Even though we're not going to be growing the Cascadia next season, we're just going to go to the first 13, which is a 13 peas in a pod variety, and we'll go from there because we actually like shelled peas more than we do just eating the entire thing. So we're just going to do that. We do have tomatoes that are setting on the vines like crazy, so looking forward to those. And then we're actually getting much bigger onions now just in a couple of days. So when I came in here and did the onion hoe again, they just continue getting bigger and bigger. So we're gonna keep working with that, keep using the onion hoe, and hopefully get some rather nice onions out of these guys. I'm not sure how many we'll have. Some of them will obviously have to be used as green onions, or we will have to dehydrate and make onion powder and things like that. But otherwise, we've got some nice onions in here. Some of them are already medium sized, which was basically what I said that I would enjoy having, is at least medium-sized onions, and we have that in here. We've got some acorn squash over here that is starting to bloom. This is the white acorn squash, so it will be white. So we have 2 of those in there, and this one is starting to bloom, and the other one is not far behind it. And once they start producing, it doesn't take them very long. And then we've got the 1 Tahitian squash that I had transplanted over here, and it is taking off as well. So once it starts really taking off, you know what happens. The vines go crazy. So we'll see what happens with those. And our roses have pretty much died back now, and they will be blooming probably again in September, just not quite as much as they were blooming right now. I'm already seeing some bloom heads on this one, so it will be blooming again in September. And again, our artichokes really are not doing anything else. So one in the middle really thinks that it wants to try to do something. Who knows? Maybe by the end of the season, something might pop up, but I doubt it. If it does, they'll probably be really small. Knockout roses are still looking amazing. They are blooming like crazy, still bushing out, and still have loads of blooms coming up on them. I did harvest another yellow squash today that was already quite large, and I've got one not shortly behind it right there, and then one in the back that we'll be picking up here in the next couple of days, I'm sure. And as I said a couple of days ago, you can basically watch the vines of the red curry squash just getting bigger by the day. The red curry, this vine in particular, if you go back and look in the videos from the last couple of days, was all the way back here, and now it is all the way up here. So it has grown in 2 days at least 2 feet. So it's growing about a foot a day. And you can see all of the vines through there are just looking amazing. And remember, this one was here, and then in 2 days it is out to here. So this one's actually grown more than 2 feet in 2 days. And we basically have peppers now all over these pepper vines. We've got just a massive amount of peppers everywhere. It looks like that they're going to produce probably 10 or more on each plant. They basically have already started. They bloomed, and then they just went straight into producing peppers like crazy. Even the ones that were slightly behind, that were my own seed, those have done the same thing. So we're going to have loads and loads and loads of peppers in here, hopefully, if the temperatures hold out and all that, because it'll take a little bit for them to get matured. So we got zucchini in here still. I got one probably that I need to harvest. And still loads and loads and loads of other stuff going on in here. And our sunflowers have grown in 2 days, probably another foot. They are just getting enormous now. Some of even the shorter ones are a lot taller. And this is our comfrey that we moved over here, and it is enjoying being in the shade a little bit more than it was over in where the roses were, because it is just growing like crazy now. And everything else just looking amazing. Pumpkins are putting on their pumpkins right now. We've got some little bitty pumpkins in here. And the funny thing is I did not plant any type of patty pan squash. So I think this one, it looks like a patty pan, but I think it's actually an acorn squash. So I did get some acorn squash in here somehow. And you can see we've got some little pumpkins. Some of them have not pollinated because they're just so thick with vines in here. But I have seen honeybees on the flowers in here, so I'm sure that they're going to eventually get to pollinate a couple of them in here. And the Boston marrow is all mixed in now with all the other pumpkins. So hopefully we'll get a Boston marrow out of this. I'm just not sure where it'll be. We'll eventually find it at the end of the season. I'm just going to let them go this year and not really bug them a whole lot. And our rhubarb is out of control. And so is our Swiss chard. Our Swiss chard is just, I think one of these is a Ford hook. So that's probably one of them that's in the mixture of these. These were a mixture of different colors. And this one is definitely a lot bigger, and it's green, so I think this one's a Ford hook. And the rest of them are reds and yellows, and I'm not sure what variety they are. And we've got our radishes all coming up now. Remember, a few days ago I planted some radishes in here. It took about 4 days for them to come up because it's a bit more shaded over here. So we've got all different mixtures of radishes in here, and they have all came up like crazy. So it's going to be quite a radish patch. And we've got acorn squash over here as well that are starting to bloom. They're still small, but they are blooming, and they did produce some last year, even though they were in the shaded area over here. So looking forward to that. And we have been thinning out some of our runners on our strawberry plants out here in the converted kiddie pool, and I've started giving those out to people. So let me show you what's going on with the strawberry plants. They're starting to produce again. You can see that here. And we've got, I'm not sure if this is a cucumber or something else that I planted in here, and I don't even remember, but it's up and it's running, so it'll do something. But we basically came in here and I just stuck a bunch of the runners in the ground everywhere that are in here. They've already rooted and they're taking off as well. And like I said, they are starting to produce again, even though it's this late in the season. These are kind of an ever-varying variety. We've got quinault in here, and we have berry basket rose, and all of them are beginning to produce, as well as the runners. New plants are getting started, and pretty soon, once these get fully rooted, I'll come in here and snap them off from the main runner. So they will be standalone plants. And then we have our acorn squash over here as well, and those are beginning to bloom. You can see some little tiny blooms in there, as well as just continuing to get bigger. And the Big Max pumpkins are definitely running and starting to just get out of control with growing. So look forward to that. We got more sunflowers over here that are slightly behind the others, so we'll have a varied amount of blossoms at different times. And this is, I thought this was going to be a French pie pumpkin, but I'm not really sure now. I think this is going to end up being some sort of melon or cucumber. So I don't remember planting those, so they're most likely volunteers. And I had basically came in here and planted some French pie pumpkins from Suburban Homestead or Wyoming / Arizona. And that little bitty patch, they never came up. So then I was surprised when something came up and I thought that was them. But the pattern of the leaf is looking a little bit more like a cucumber. But who knows? It may surprise me. It may actually be the French pie pumpkin because the leaves for both can kind of look similar. But if you notice the leaf pattern on this one, which looks more like a melon, and the leaf pattern on the Big Max pumpkins is a lot different. So we'll see. We'll find out. And we've got a Ghetto squash over here that I didn't think came up. It did, and it's starting to get runners on it and blooms as well. So hopefully they'll do something. I'm not sure because it is so late in the season. But we'll keep looking at it and hopefully something will happen. So it's basically an overview of the garden right now. Just a short little video to let you know what's going on. All of our flowers still looking beautiful. All of our herbs, we're starting to harvest a lot of herbs now. Mints looking amazing. And we did plant some more carrots and some more daikon radish in here. The daikon radish, of course, are the ones that came up first. So we have not seen the carrots come up as yet. Again, we've had trouble with carrots the whole season. But we'll deal with what we have so far. And the pans continue to work perfectly against the birds. The birds have stayed out of here, so you can actually see the transplants that I did of the cabbages are definitely coming up to size now. And those were new plants. And some of the broccoli that I planted, it's all getting a lot bigger real fast. So hopefully we'll have some new broccoli heads once these finish producing. And we'll have something for fall. So anyway, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell for notices on new videos as they come out. And we shall see you in the next one.